down. Get somebody. Go down. Get somebody. Go down. Welcome to another Doggone Podcast here in the CEC studios. I'm your host, Mike the Mad Dog. Today's episode is brought to us by Mike Fitzpatrick Ford in Noonan. You want a new or used car, go by there and talk to those guys. And my guest today is a very important guy to one of our producers in here. He's a former Alabama offensive lineman. He got drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, and now he's on 92.9 The Game in the morning. And he is my good friend, Mr. Mike Johnson. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm so glad you came on. I was thinking about giving you a call for a long time, but I knew you were busy with your radio show, but it is nice to have you on. Listen, I want to go ahead and jump right into this. We're down to 4 games. We're down to 4 teams. And this is not exactly how I wanted it to play out. I know it's not how you wanted it to play out.
No.
You did not want this outcome whatsoever. And I I just want to know, what do you think about who's going to be left standing out of these 4 teams? Who do you think is going to be left?
Well, first of all, you're right. It's not how I envisioned it. I definitely didn't envision a 35-point Bama loss the other day. The only saving grace for a Bama fan living in the state of Georgia right now is that Georgia lost in the same round. I mean, thank goodness that I didn't have to deal with Bulldog fans, for the foreseeable future. But I'm not sure how it's going to pan out. I think that any Indiana non-believers that were going into the last round absolutely believe in Indiana now. They play such a physical brand of football. I keep calling it bully ball. You play well in the trenches. Reminds me of some of the young Nick Saban teams that I was a part of. And I think all of us in the Southeast are probably rooting for Ole Miss one way or another, at least anybody other than the Miami fans. So that's who I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for an Ole Miss Indiana championship game. But who knows how it's going to play out. It's been one of the fun things about having 12 teams in this playoff is you really don't ever know what you're going to get from round to round. And should be a couple good games coming up this weekend, no doubt.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is I was talking to somebody before I came on here. With the exception of Indiana, and this is the second year in a row that the teams that won their conference championships and basically took a month off lost. And I'm wondering if it's just, is there too much time off there? Because it seems like you just get too cold. It's almost like you're starting up another season. It's like you're starting all over in week 1 all over again. Do they need to fix this? I mean, we obviously see a problem it being the second year.
Well, it probably should fix it, but I think the list of things that I have that need to be fixed about college football right now, there's about 100 things that probably stand in front of, first round buys and things like that. And I'm not sure it has anything to do with the time off, right? I mean, I think when I look at it, I look at some of these teams, there are teams that are good on certain Saturdays. There's teams that play up to their opponents and that are always going to have a puncher's chance. And that's kind of the way I think of a team like Ole Miss that beat Georgia last week. There's also teams that are consistently good. You mentioned Indiana. You can tell that they've been coached by Kurt Cignetti not to ever have like those letdown games and, just make sure they're always playing to a standard. It's molded in the way that Kirby's molded Georgia and Saban had molded Alabama and some of the great teams and programs that have come before him. So, I could see something being done about it. I think if you expanded to 16 and tried to host more on-campus games and things like that, maybe you'd find a solution in there. But there's just so many other things that I don't like about college football right now that when I start compiling the list, that's probably buried somewhere in the in the teens, with what I'm asking of the sport right now.
Yeah, is the committee one of the things you don't like about it?
I think that they could stand to get rid of the format more than the committee. I think the committee does a fine job. I mean, there's always going to be that when you look at college football, right? I mean, I played in a BCS national title game, and there's computer rankings and all this other stuff that kind of goes into it. We almost, for a while there, for about an hour's time, maybe even less than that, we thought that we were going to play TCU in the national title game in 2009. That's when the out of bounds throw by Colt McCoy in the Big 12 championship, and then they put 1 second back on the clock and they make a field goal. So I don't know. There's always going to be something wrong with the format of when you select teams and you're not just, letting teams that have the puncher's chance go all the way through it. I didn't need to see James Madison. I didn't need to see Tulane. I didn't want them to expand to 12. So I hate to say they need to expand to 16, but there's got to be a happy medium in there somewhere where you don't have to have somebody's opinion, form the national championship.
Yeah, I want to go back to Georgia. During that game, there's certain things that I don't think it changed the outcome of the game, but do you notice that officiating was kind of bad this year? Through all the games, not just that game. It was just like I thought that targeting call against Georgia was bogus. Like I said, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. I still think the best team won. And then there was another throw where that Gunner made, and it looked like it was like an attempted murder on him. The way he got hit and folded in half after that play, and I was like, we're not throwing any roughing the passer flags on that, but I don't understand the officiating in that, and that targeting call I thought was completely uncalled for.
You're not going to like this. First of all, there's nobody that hates the targeting calls worse than I do. As a matter of fact, I usually on Twitter, I'll make it a point, even when the team playing Alabama gets a targeting call, to call it out and say how much I hate it. I've pointed out multiple times. Like, I think at some point the ejections that happen have got to go away. I think maybe you have maybe you have a situation at some point where a player sues the NCAA because they've been ejected from a football game. Maybe that's one of the things that can kind of lighten the load. But to the part you're not going to like, I actually thought that was a good call. It's made to protect defenseless receivers. And while I hate some of the last minute adjustments you have to try to make, and I hate when guys try to, avoid the contact and accidentally get put in there with the crown of the helmet, I thought the guy was a defenseless receiver. And in the end, that's kind of the letter of the law. But you're right. Going all the way back to the season, when Georgia played at Auburn, I'll never forget, the goal line call in that one that was crazy that nobody was happy about because should have been a touchdown probably one way or the other, but they don't get a chance to get in, and Georgia doesn't get a chance to return it. It's been a rough year for officiating. There's no doubt. And I feel for the guys, honestly. There's 4K cameras everywhere. There's a million people videotaping everything. There's a phone in a hand. There's 24 cameras for the TV networks. It's never going to be an easy job, but I do think that this year, more so than other years, they probably would like to have a few of the calls back that they had throughout the season.
Yeah, this is going to be the second or third year where, as far as I know, Kirby's not going to make any changes to his staff. Now, as a former player, how important is that? Do you think he should stay with the consistency, or do you think there needs to be some changes on his staff this year?
I'm completely fine with him staying consistent with his staff. I know there's been a lot made of Bobo and Glenn Schumann and whoever else, and it's just not as easy, to win national titles and to kind of be that machine as it probably used to be to keep with that consistency. In a day and age when it is impossible to keep kids in the program and to develop quarterbacks, because this quarterback's transferring here and that quarterback's transferring there, and this guy's going to the NFL, and everybody every Power 4 quarterback there is transferring. Literally, and I think Bama's dealing with Ty Simpson announced he's going to the NFL, but you get Gunnar Stockton back in that situation. You have the same, offense coordinator, same defense coordinator with all the talent Georgia's going to have next year. I think it's the right call. Did they have some hiccups along the way? Sure. They also had a lot of youth at certain positions this year. And I think given that staff a little bit of time to actually sink their teeth in and develop from one year to the next is going to prove dividends for Georgia.
Well, somebody brought it up to me, and I thought about it too. It seems like the teams that are remaining in the playoffs right now are, went deep into the portal. They're very portal heavy teams, and Georgia necessarily wasn't that way. Does Kirby need to step it up and dig more into the portal, or does he need to stay the course and just try to be consistent and say we don't want to pay anybody, we hit people here, and we want to develop people into going into the NFL, the next level? Man,
that's a tough question because the old school football player in me is like, no, you don't need to hit the portal. I want guys that want to bleed. If I'm a Georgia fan, I want guys that want to bleed red and black, right?
Yes.
I genuinely think, and it's hard to say because you just mentioned the teams that are still in there are heavy portal teams that, all have transfer quarterbacks and this, that, and the other. But I also saw how this affected Florida State, and where that program's gone after a couple of years ago when they went undefeated and everybody opted out of the bowl game when Georgia plays them. That's a 70-point victory for Georgia, and they haven't been the same since. And so I think it's tough to say right now because you look at, like you said, the Final Four teams, you're like, oh man, they really beefed things up. Well, in the end, I think your core team has got to be developed on campus, and if you're going to start bringing in these, you know, this whole core group from somewhere else that's just showing up for a paycheck, that's when I think you start running into long-term issues. So I think Kirby's doing the right thing. I loved Kirby from my time with him at the University of Alabama, and I think he's going about it the right way. I trust his judgment on that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you were there when Kirby was there in Alabama. Now, even though he coached the other side of the ball, what was your take on what kind of coach he was? Did you foresee that he might become a head coach one day, or did you just know was he as intense as he is now when he was in Alabama?
Oh, for sure. Even more so, even more intense, because I think he had what was that? We're dealing with almost 20 years ago now when I met Kirby, would have been 2007. So a little bit more light on his toes, right? A little more jumping up and down probably than he does now, even though he has a lot of sideline antics as it is. But back then it was even more youthful. You're talking about a 30, young 30-year-old Kirby Smart, running down the sidelines, screaming, doing everything else. And our whole staff was like that for the most part. I mean, Scott Cochran was the guy that spent some time at Georgia. Kurt Signetti was on that staff as well. Jim McElwain. They were all young. They were all hungry. And they all did a really, really good job of making sure that they, brought that competitiveness to the sideline. So I think we all kind of understood that Kirby would eventually be that guy. I played a round of golf with him in like 2014, maybe 2015, and kind of talked to him about the head coaching thing. And he just kind of shunned away from it and said, if you take the wrong one, it'll be the last one. And I think he was kind of waiting for that Georgia job all along, and it's paid dividends for him.
Yeah, I remember when Dan Lanning was leaving, like he had a lot of offers for like smaller schools or whatever, and they were all like, and Kirby was like, nope, you want to wait. And then Oregon came up, and he was like, that's where you want to go.
That's
because
where you want to
because Kirby had that same mentality. Look, you need to go. And now Dan Lanning's like, I'm in Oregon, man. He's got Nike money. It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I know, which is why he's probably in the Final Four right now.
Right. And he understands that, that youthful attitude that you have to have, that intensity that you have to have day in and day out. And so I think there's been a lot of guys like that. I think that, the people that come from under Kirby Smart and or Nick Saban and have been part of those programs, they understand the intensity to bring on a daily basis. And I don't know how coaches these days do it, man. I don't know how you keep the energy to keep re-recruiting your own players and deal with contracts and deal with opt-outs and everything else that comes along with it. I don't know how they find the energy. So kudos to them for keep plodding along in this line of work, because I don't think I could do it right now.
No. I mean, like every player just seems like they're one pissed off day away from someone. I don't want to do this anymore, and I don't have to. And to think about this. We used to say, "Oh, this guy got a verbal commit." When we were so excited when you see that this guy, this is a 5-star. This guy's coming to our team, and then after a while, you're like, he might flip. Then you got the letter of intent. You're like, he signed. Now none of that means anything. If he signs, if he does anything, if he gets on campus, he's like, I don't want to do this.
I remember hanging out with Brandon Adams. Obviously, that is from Dog Nation. The day that American Heritage was having their kind of signing day ordeal, and it was Patrick Surtain was committing and Tyson Campbell was committing, and Bama got one of them and Georgia got the other one, and they were both 5-star DBs, and you're like, man, this was crazy. Can't wait for these guys to grow for the next 4 years and play alongside their teammates at these great colleges and go to the NFL. Now they're both extremely well paid in the NFL, and it seems like that form of college football is just a pipe dream. It just seems like it doesn't even exist anymore. So
yeah, it's the good old days.
That long ago, that was what 7, 8 years ago. It's a completely different sport than the one.
I think you and I met in 2017 in Atlanta, didn't we? The SEC championship game with Auburn and Georgia played that game.
That's right. Yeah,
I do remember you picked Auburn to win that game. How'd that work out?
Carry on Johnson, man. I'll never forget making that pick.
But. Oh yeah, no. It was very good to see you guys up there that time. It was funny because I walked into the place where you guys were, and I mean, it was hectic. The whole Atlanta was just beaming. It was War Eagle, Roll Tide. I mean, everybody was saying all kinds of, go Dogs, go Dogs. Everybody was saying everything. And so then I walk in there, And the woman's looking down, and I said, "Hey, it's kind of busy in here. You guys doing something this weekend? What's going on?" And she literally stopped and looked up at me like she was like, "What?" And then I started laughing. Is there something going on? And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I'm."
Oh,
And then she saw I was wearing Georgia head to toe. She was like, "You're an idiot." And I was like, "Yeah,
oh
well."
man,
Anyway, I was
those are
messing
the
with.
best days, man.
It
Those are the best.
was.
I'll never forget the day that Bama and Georgia played in the national title game at Mercedes-Benz that year in 2017. I had so many media obligations that day, and I was still cutting my teeth, doing different things and working with SC Country. I did headline news that morning, did another couple podcasts that day. By the time that game actually got there, it started like sleeting and the president was coming. So security was backed up and Mercedes Benz was still real new. And I was like, you know what? I did all this work all week and I followed this entire thing all season and I don't even want to go to the game. And I sold my tickets probably 60 minutes before kickoff.
What?
Like, yeah, I did. I regret it still to this day. It's a great Bama game. The two would come back and all that other stuff. But I had just such a long day and the weather was bad and the security lines were crazy. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna opt out of this one. But I hate thinking back on that memory because that was a crazy, crazy day for Bama.
Yeah, I want to go back to something real quick. I mean, Georgia, obviously, all right, they're back to back, SEC championship, and that's nothing to duck your head about. But the fact that they see they can't get over this hump after that whole bye week 2 years in a row. What does Kirby need to change to get over the hump to actually get in? Maybe to the semifinals next year.
It's tough. I think when you look at specifically the game they lost this year against Ole Miss, I think one of the things that structure of defense, and Kirby has gone into great detail about this before. I've heard him at coaching clinics. I've heard Glenn Schumann talking about this, is how it's just so hard to defend. They are so maniacal in the detail that they coach defense with, right? And they're so tedious about this player having this leverage and this player having this spacing and this, knowing this route concept that sometimes when things break down and there's just a better athlete in the backfield, that it's hard to do things with from the quarterback position. So I think that eventually, and like I said, Kirby's talked about this before. You went from when I was a senior in high school, or I'm sorry, a senior in college in 2009. Rolando McClain was our middle linebacker. He was 265 pounds. They didn't even offer Roquan Smith to come to Bama because they thought he was too small. And then by the time he's leaving Georgia, he's a Buckus Award winner, and he's like the prototype for how you want to play linebacker because of quarterbacks like Trinidad Chambliss and some of the other players. They had to eventually, like at Bama, go from Rolando McClain and Dante Hightower at 250, 260 to Reuben Foster, who's 225, 230, guys who could fly around. So I just think the off-schedule stuff is so hard to defend against. I don't know that anything necessarily needs to change. But hopefully in those games you can kind of play the keep away bit, right? Where Bobo can keep the offense on the field. They can kind of ground and pound. They can keep the ball out of the other offense's hands, and you just kind of turn the tide in your favor that way. But the game was so good, and that game was so good. It's hard for me with the season that Georgia had and some of the plays they made and some of the moments to say that anything needs to change. I just think that sometimes on certain nights you run into teams that have a little bit more luck in those given situations.
Yeah, you brought up Trinidad Chambliss. I'm telling you, that kid could have been blindfolded, throwing the ball behind his back, and he would have made completions. I've never seen anything like it. And the receivers were on the money too.
Yeah, oh yeah, and that's it. That's I used to say all the time that Bama. I think I ate my words on this one time, and it was when Bama played Trevor Lawrence in the national title because I was like, Bama just doesn't ever lose to pocket passers, right? Bama's just, and Georgia's been a lot the same way. You just don't lose to pocket passers that much. It's always the dual threat guy. It's always the +1 in the run game. It's always the quarterback who can pick up a big first down with his legs, and that's the nature of the beast. Sometimes you're going to have guys like that who just make magical plays on given nights, and hats off to them for finding guys to do it, specifically with their coaching situation over there. But coming all the way from D2 Ferris State, I believe, is where Trinidad Chambliss was at.
Yeah.
Credit to him, man, because he's done some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, but what does Gunner need to do? What did he learn this year? Does he need to look down the field more? What does he need to do as far as when he moves? Because sometimes it seems like he hikes the ball and he moves, and I don't know. I don't know if he stares somebody down or if because he wants to run. And a lot of times, I appreciate him running because he gets first downs and he makes
Right.
something out of nothing. But then there's sometimes I'm like, dude, you see it even at home or even when you're at the game. You pointed that guy was wide open. Does he need to see the field more while he's running, like kind of like what Chambliss did, or what needs to happen?
Well, sure, but it's like you just said. What'd you say about the Ole Miss wide receivers? They were almost perfect, right? It was like watching Ole Miss go up and make some of those plays downfield. Their spacing on their scramble drills, their ability to find sit in those open pockets in the defense. So it's kind of it can't be just a one man show. You got to have guys down the field making plays, and I think Georgia's wide receivers and their pass catchers were much improved from what they were the year before, but I still don't know that you have the guys that you had back when Brock Bowers was there and Lad McConkey and guys like that. So I think there's a little bit of all that. I also think I think if Kirby had it his way, he'd probably take a lot more things off Gunnar Stockton's shoulders and put a lot more in the hands of the running game and have the ability to gain 5-6 yards on the ground, much in the way you saw Indiana do to Alabama. It's like, the passing game doesn't even matter at that point, right? I think that Fernando Mendoza wins the Heisman, and then he goes out against Bama and throws like 15 passes. Like he didn't even need to throw it downfield. So it's got to be well rounded, having explosive playmakers, having people down the field, and also you're right. He's probably got to get his eyes up, but that's one of the beautiful things of keeping Bobo locked in and keeping Gunner on campus and doing all the things you need to do is that they can work on those things this offseason. They can watch tape and they can, hit the ground running when next season starts.
Yeah, there was a play. It was a fourth down play, and they were trying to get him to jump off sides, and the ball got hiked. And then I heard later on that the rookie center shouldn't have hiked the ball. It was a surprise, and they just had to kind of go with it. You're a former offensive lineman. What is it like to be a rookie at that stage? And what can you see like his nerves getting to him, and he just hiked the ball prematurely?
Yeah, some form of miscommunication is all that is, and it's crazy. We were having this conversation yesterday. The Atlanta Falcons have an offensive lineman. Their right tackle this year had 10 false starts. 10 false starts on the season, which is crazy. And you're like, how can that keep happening? And kind of going about that as an offensive lineman and just explaining first and foremost, and this is just a broad picture thing. A lot of people don't realize the center has the hardest time hearing because he's facing directly away from where the quarterback's talking. And, sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's not. But I think people don't realize that neither of the center's ears are actually facing the quarterback a lot of times, so they can't hear stuff. But yeah, I mean, it could be simply a key word. Hey, we have this play, but the live word to make to put the play on is gold, right? And so maybe he thinks he heard gold, but really the play was never put on by the quarterback or whoever else was making the call, and he thought it was. Could be something very simple to where if it's explained in real time and it's explained to everybody else, it seems very simple until you get out there and the lights are on and everybody's screaming and you can't hear nothing. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, did I hear gold? I think I heard gold. Yeah, I think I heard gold. I don't want to be the one who doesn't snap the football. So here we go. And it's just something that, you gain with experience and calming down and being in those situations to be able to do it moving forward.
Yeah, you said you were talking about false starts. It seems like Kirby, that's like one of the biggest things he gets upset with his false starts. When you were back in Alabama, how upset did Nick Saban get when you guys would false start?
Uh, Slightly. Let's just put it that way. I mean, it's a non-effort penalty. You've heard Kirby say that. Nick used to say the same thing. It's not a penalty that's being done because of effort. I think when you have like a holding call, pass interference, face mask, things like that, it's like I don't like those, but things are going to happen when you're flying around playing with your hair on fire. The procedural errors, though, where you're just lined up in the wrong place or you didn't hear the right thing, or maybe it's, sometimes it's not even coached the right way. That's what'll make you sick. You spend hours upon hours upon hours pouring over tape as a coach and making sure that the game plan is, everything's perfect. And then to get in some of those situations and one guy just simply messes up a cadence, you're like, you want to pull your hair out. So,
Yeah, especially if you're third and one, and then all of a sudden you get a false start, and you're like, okay, well, now we're that would now that was
completely different play at that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
It's a
Thanks a lot,
completely
guys.
different play.
We were all just going to lunge forward and get the first down, and now we can't do that.
Yeah,
So
it's a
that happens.
completely different play call. 3rd and 1, 3rd and 6.
Yeah, listen, I normally don't do this, but since you cover the Atlanta Falcons and you were an Atlanta Falcon, what do you think about what's going to happen with this coaching search?
Oh man, it's the golden question right now. I mean, first and foremost, I think that hopefully within the next 4 or 5 days, you get an announcement that Matt Ryan's the president of football operations over there. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think they've got to find somebody young. I know that there's been a lot of people kind of hoping that John Harbaugh would answer the phone if and when somebody called and kind of install him. I don't even know that I fit on that train. I'd like to find Atlanta's version of, Sean McVay or Sean Payton or Andy Reid, somebody who's an offensive play caller, somebody who's going to bring consistency and kind of that youthful vision, to this franchise. I don't want to know defensive coordinator who's going to rely on the offensive coordinator, and then that offense coordinator maybe gets a head coaching job, or you got to fire him and your identity changes, and then you can't develop quarterback. I want a play caller and a quarterback that are going to be in lockstep for the next 10 years. And there's some names out there, and hopefully they can find one of them to step in the situation and get it pointing in the right direction. But your guess is as good as mine who that's going to be right now.
Well, this is what blows my mind is they see you see everything online. You look see Facebook and Twitter is like this is the odds-on favorite to get the Atlanta job. I'm like, how do you know they haven't even got their athletic director yet?
Right.
Like
Yeah, I
like
mean,
nobody's who are they contacting? Who are these people that are actually saying this?
yeah,
Are they just all guessing or what's the situation? Nobody. They always said they're bringing this guy in for an interview. Who's interviewing him? There's no AD there yet.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
it
like,
is crazy because you do have all these and Lord knows there's 24 NFL insiders now. The Schefters, Rappaport, Pelissero, Garofolo. I mean, you go all the way up and down. CBS Sports, NFL.com, ESPN, all these, and they've all got different sources. It's like they might have spoke to the assistant scout for the Falcons, and he says, "Well, I'd like to have this guy." But then one of the other ones talks to like an agent, or one of the other ones talks to like a research firm, and they have their own ideas of who's a good fit, or this guy was a grad assistant back here and worked with that person, so I'm just going to connect the dots. And nobody knows at this point. I mean, 2 years ago, we poured over all this information for what felt like a month about 15 different candidates for the Falcons head coach, and nobody would have guessed that it was going to be Raheem Morris. And yet
no.
there you were after all the Bill Belichick talk and Mike McDonald's from Atlanta. They need to get him, and Vrabel's on the open market and all these other guys. And it was Raheem Morris, and nobody would have ever guessed. So I try to refrain from just making open-ended guesses. I have my preference of who I would like, but I don't have any guesses of who they'll actually go with at this point.
Yeah, but what's the difference? I mean, as an offensive lineman, was there much difference? Because it seems like there's some players that just can't make that transition from college to NFL. But was it difficult for you as an offensive lineman to make that transition? I know it seems to be with quarterback because some players who are quarterbacks in college just don't make it in the NFL. And then there's some players that you don't even know where they're from, and they're just outstanding NFL quarterbacks.
Yeah, it is tough. It was tough for me. I think that you spend so much time on the just finite details when you're being coached in college, right? I mean, it's my head placement is here, and this is my first step on this play, and this is where my hands need to be on this play, and on this play, the running back's timing is going to be 6 yards instead of 5 yards, and all these small, small nuances that you go over and pour over in college. And you know, uh, I was with Saban for 3 years, and Jim McElwain was our coordinator for multiple years. I had the same offensive line coach for 3 years. Knew exactly what he wanted, and I knew why he wanted it because of this running back doing that, or the quarterback being here, or whatever else it may be, the timing of things. And then you step out of that and you go into a completely different situation with a completely different coach running what's probably a different offense and a different scheme. And everybody's also more athletic, right? So it does take time, I think, for a lot of players. You know, uh, I'm a huge fan of Jared Wilson. Just came out of Georgia, played for the New England Patriots, obviously. But there was times you turn on the film and he struggled mightily, even as well as you think he played at times and how good that team has been. The Falcons got 6 sacks on the New England Patriots, and they really targeted the left side of the offensive line in New England. It's just very hard to know the finite details. If you're gifted enough, you can make it work very quickly. Um, but for the guys that are like the long term development projects and guys that don't have all this crazy athletic upside, yeah, there is a huge learning curve that can that can take a while to figure out what exactly coaches want or need.
Yeah, I mean, like, it seems like it's so much faster in the NFL when you watch it. You know, when you watch it Saturday, I mean, there's some fast players on Saturday. When you see in the NFL, you're like, my God, like those guys are moving, the receivers, everything just seems quicker. And I'm wondering, you know, if it's the same way. I mean, the defensive linemen, do they I mean, obviously, but I mean, is it the same thing, same kind of blocking scheme, or do they hit differently? Or they obviously they're tougher. What was it like going there and blocking those guys?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I mean, yeah, it was absolutely a different blocking scheme. We were run heavy in college, and obviously I played with Mark Ingram, and he wins the Heisman Trophy when I was senior, and I get to Atlanta and blocking for Michael Turner, and some of the stuff was the same, some of it wasn't. But yeah, I think it's not just about how good the players are; it's that everybody is like the 1% from college. It was the same jump for me from high school to college. It's like I played good players in high school, but the best players of the best players I played in high school, everybody's like that in college. And the same thing goes from college to the NFL. It's like, oh man, I played that one really tough guy, that played for Florida, and man, he was really hard to block. And then you get to the NFL, and every single guy is like that. Every single guy on the roster, and some guys have specialties where they're in on goal line packages, and some defensive end is like 6'6", and you can't even touch him with your arms are outstretched. So it it's there's so much nuance to it that sometimes, yeah, it's tough. It's a tough transition to be able to make for a lot of people.
One last thing I want to ask you before we go, and because holding is such to me, a referee discretion call. Because to me, everybody's holding on every play. It's
Yeah.
impossible to have somebody run at you like that and you not try to hold them. How often? I mean, how often do the offensive line coaches tell you? Hold as long as you can, and so you can get away with it, or what's the deal on holding? I mean, how often did you have to hold those big guys like that?
Well, that's a good question. I was always taught, this was kind of the rule of thumb we had, is that if your face was touching that player, it wasn't holding. Um, and then I had a referee one time tell me, as long as you're holding towards the goalpost, that they won't ever call holding. If you're holding towards the sideline, you're going to see a flag. But if you're holding towards the goalpost, you're probably going to be good with it. My offensive line coach in college was an older guy named Joe Pendry, and he always said, and blocking's changed a lot in the last 15, 20 years since all this was going on. But his thought always was, if your face mask is in contact at the same time as your hands, it won't ever be holding. The minute your face mask comes off of the other guy's body and your arms start to be outstretched, then you're going to be a problem. But if you keep, 3 points of contact and you keep leverage and you keep driving, then you're usually going to, be in the good on the good graces of the referees. So, yeah, it's a good question. It's tough nowadays when you look at some of these offenses, because I know that the offenses in college and in the NFL, they don't get to practice in a lot of the same ways that we used to. When I first got to college, it was nothing to see players like on the ground and goal line and just having these scrums. And now it's like a complete no to ever be on the ground because you don't want to risk a lower body injury. But at the same time, I think that kind of lends itself to having lower body injuries because everybody's always standing up and people are falling into your legs. So yeah, there's a lot of anger I get watching when some of these holding calls come out, and it's against what my base rules always used to be, but it is what it is.
I talked to a guy who used to play a fullback at Ohio State, and he said, you don't even want to know the smack talk that goes on across that line." And he said the things that are said. He said it's not necessary. He said, and when you're in a pile, he said there's all kinds of stuff going on when you're in that pile. Everybody trying to get out, everybody just shoving the other player, doing other things to him. And a buddy might always say, "I don't know why they're not out gouging them." I said, "I guarantee you they're gouging some eyes in that pile, or they're doing something when they're getting out of there. There's something going on. I know there's
Yeah,
got to be."
an inadvertent forearm and a neck or an elbow and in a rib cage, things like that. Yeah, you definitely. And it's harder to get away with now because I was talking about earlier about the referees. It's like there's a million cameras. They're all in HD or 4K, but yeah, I mean, when I first got to college, I remember we didn't even have instant replay when I first got to school, and some of the games were like on the ESPN pay per view where you had to dial it up and spend $10 if you wanted to watch Georgia against Tennessee Martin or something like that. So it's a little bit harder to get away with it these days than it used to be.
All right. Well, listen, man, I'd like to talk to you some more, but we got to wrap this thing up. I'd like to thank you for coming on here today.
Yeah, no problem, buddy. Anytime. Enjoyed it, and I'm going to say this to you before you sign off, but roll tide.
Oh my gosh! You're the first one to ever do that. So you'd be glad I like you, or else I'll get them to edit that out, but I won't let them do it. Anyway, listen, I want to thank everybody for watching another Doggone podcast. I'd like to thank Mike Fitzpatrick Ford for sponsoring this. Mike Johnson, you can check him out on 92.9 The Game in the morning from 6 to 9 a.m. This has been another Doggone podcast, and doggone it, I'm out.